Aaron with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. I'm here today with some guests, and our special guest is Super Teddy. I'm sure you guys have all met him, also AKA Dominic. So, Dom, hey, how are you doing this morning? Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. Welcome. Good morning. Good afternoon, wherever you might be. So we're going to discuss the coding and such, kind a little bit of stuff under the hood. Some of that content might be a little proprietary depending on what it is, but I see that you have the developer's guide up here. So do you want to go over
Yeah.
this a little bit?
So whenever we get a lot of questions in the main Discord, at least in mod creation. That's kind of where a lot of the developers call home when we want to discuss, you know, questions. How do I do this within the code base? How do I do that? Me and Moon Wizard are well. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Dominic. I'm one of the SmiteWorks ruleset developers. Um, Again, I'm not sure what Cameron's title is, but he also works in the same area as I. I'm one of the developers. So basically, every rule set that I would say I say any internal rule set that's come out, and I say in the last uh, three 3 years has been basically done by me. I made the Modifius 2D20 systems. I have revamped, no pun intended in this case, the werewolf and also vampire rule sets, which we're affectionately calling the World of Darkness rule sets, or the more or less the World of Darkness system. Um, so I also have also done many features that you see within Fantasy Grounds. Like for instance, I was the one that helped get the reference manual builder into Fantasy Grounds. I also worked on Starfinder ship combat tracker. So any of these features you're just not happy about, I'm the guy you're going to blame. Um, there's other features as well that are a little bit, I would say, behind the curtain that you might just not be, as a general user of Fantasy Grounds, might not be aware of. And when you encounter, like for instance, one of the biggest complaints or in the early testing phases of Unity was the performance. Um, there's so many different hands that worked on this project, on this product, that basically there's so many different little dials and knobs that we have to kind of tinker with and kind of turn to get it to its optimal state. And one of those things is like optimizing the rule set code, making sure modules are loading data properly, things along those lines.
Yeah.
So that's what I do for SmiteWorks. And also, I'm kind of, the answer and question and answer guy for a lot of third party developers. I try to make myself available to, like, just name two companies off the top of my head would be Grim Press and Rob Toohey's guys. Um, so that we also try to assist our extension developers as much as we can. So if you have something on the Forge, you can definitely reach out through either mod creation or me directly, and I can try to help you out if it's a coding or technical question related to Fantasy Grounds.
Yep.
One of the things I always like to start off when I'm trying to either mentor or tutor somebody on rule set extension development, because they're kind of going hand in hand, both rule set and extension development, because you're doing the same processes, just the scope is different. Okay. Um, One of the first places I always tell them to go is going to the developer guide. The developer guide is a good resource, break down a lot of information, and you can take your time with it. Now, before we get into this, the one thing I like to always precursor is learn Fantasy Grounds vanilla, plain old vanilla, no extensions, no add-ons. Try to see how everything kind of functions, because it'll give you a better understanding once you start going through the file structure on why it's there and what it's doing. right? When you add in, now I'm not saying extensions are bad. I think extensions are super awesome, right? It makes you a stronger DM if you notice that in this particular case, when you're running this particular group, that this becomes a pain in the neck task all the time. Now, if I can create a quick extension, it doesn't have to be really expansive, but a quick extension that helps me along with that process, then extensions are great, right? And
Yep.
you also make Fantasy Grounds your own in that whole process, right? That's the one cool thing about Fantasy Grounds for me when I started back in, I think it was 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Um, was 2013, 2014. I can't remember the exact day, year, excuse me. But was if I didn't like a direction that rule set was going, or there's something that just wasn't being handled correctly, I went in and tried to tinker and try to get it to do what I wanted to do. So you make Phase Grounds your own in that case. We allow you to basically reconfigure Phase Grounds to do whatever you want. I've actually have some personal projects that make Phase Grounds into like a text-based adventure engine, and doing other various weird things that I just haven't figured out what to do with it in terms of the grand scheme of Phase Grounds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's why I always recommend going with the developer guide as a start. It breaks down a lot of information, so you're not going to probably get through this in one sitting. But this is just more or less the tip of the iceberg, right? And also, you want to kind of look at information or dissect certain information based on what you're trying to accomplish, right? That's usually the first goal. Is always try to find a reason why you're going to code something,
Yeah.
because it gives you a goal and kind of um, focuses your attention. Because I don't about me, like when I go through, sometimes I can go down a rabbit hole that would take me like a week to get out of, and it has nothing to do with my actual project,
Yeah.
just because I thought something was cool, right? So this is the first place I always tell people to kind of go through, and
Right.
a lot of the stuff, like I mentioned before, rule sets, extensions, modules, you want to understand how they work and how they're created. And this breaks that down very well in a lot of cases. It might need some updating here and there every once in a while, which is another valid complaint from the community. But what I mostly use it for is the API references down here in the bottom. Um, the and it's kind of where I'm at the point in my working with SmiteWorks that I only need this part. It's just a refresher course basically of what a global API can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's start with first the file structure, because
Yep.
the file structure is where everybody kind of helps unlock a lot of doors and explain how that process works. So let me see. Yeah, here we go. So the file structure, when you open up Base Grounds, let's see. There's a little folder. Yeah. I know. Go away. There's a folder structure up. There's a folder icon up here in the top left-hand corner. If you click that, it'll take you right to your rule set folder, right? Or your channels folder, or I mean your basically your root folder for Fancy Grounds, right? Where all the rule set files are, where all the campaign information is, and all that kind of good stuff. So at the root, there's a few different folders I like to kind of highlight here. First, the campaigns folder. That is where all of your campaigns, anything that shows up in under load campaign, displays, and all of them are simple, um, folders with files in it, right? Inside those folders, let's see if I could, without showing off something I'm not supposed to. Um, Let me think. How am I going to do this? All right, so let's. I don't want to pause. But anyway, so when you go into a campaign, it's going to have a structure kind of very similar to a module. So I can actually kind of uh, at some point show you some of that. But it contains everything that your campaign has collected. So any new record you've created, any new characters that are created, anything in the combat tracker, the party sheet, it just collects it all in that whole one file. And you can actually use that to help test and see how things are while you're programming. So that's why it's I want to highlight campaigns, because you want to see what is behind or under the hood or behind the curtain as you're kind of going through it. The next one I want to highlight is the extension folder. Extension folder is where all your extensions are going to lie. So if anything you get from this whole conversation is um, where to put files, I call that a win, because again, if you're gonna want to get start tinkering with fancy grants, you're gonna have to get comfortable with these folders. You're gonna have to understand why things go in where they need to go. Currently, the program looks for um, extension files or folders, excuse me, or um, I always when I do development, I always do it as a folder because folders get loaded first before any kind of packaged file. Now, think of an extension file, the one with .ext at the end, as basically a zipped up folder. It is a zipped up, and it contains basically everything you need to run the extension, right? But ultimately, it's just a zip file, right? That has the file extension of ext. Those all go there. Now, if I'm going to create a new extension, I would create a new folder in there and then also add in a file with the name extension.xml. And we're going to go over that a little bit later on how to go through that process and setting that up. And I'm going to show you how easy it is just to create a very simple extension, like a very rudimentary extension that doesn't involve much than just saying hello world, basically. It's more or less what it is, an hello world um, process. Now, the next one you want to know is where the modules folder is where all your modules go. All your books, anything that is not vaulted, and we're going to get to the vault file folder here in a second. But anything that is freely open, like something you can open up and peek in and look at, that's the place you want to you want to kind of throw that in there. Now, if you drop your file or folder into this folder, and you try to load up your campaign and you're like, well, I can't find this module. So there's a few places you can kind of look. And we're going to go over that once we kind of look at certain file structures later on in the talk. But just kind of going overview, this is where you want to look for all your modules. The next one is the rule sets folder. Now, if you're going to create a whole brand new rule set to play your particular game system because CoreRPG isn't handling it very well. More core, it just seems like a huge task to try to set everything up, or you want something more permanent. When you're going to set up those rule sets that appear when you go to the create campaign, and you want it showing up here as an option, that folder is where you're going to place those files as well. And then from there, you can then create a campaign using that rule set, and then also then start to tinker with the files and structures and making sure things look the way you want them to look and function the way you want to function. So that's that folder. The last but not least is the vault. The vault is one of those folders that basically contains all of the encrypted files, whether it's a theme or a module or it's an extension or a rule set. This is where it sits. And the reason I'm highlighting this particular folder is because a lot of new rulers, not excuse me, a lot of new rule sets that are coming out in recent, I'd say maybe a year or so, has been encrypted. That's that's because the publisher of that particular system has requested SmiteWorks to lock it away. You could also see that with a lot of Forge content as well. The Forge developer can make that decision to lock away their coding secrets behind our encryption, and you just can't seem to unlock those. You will never be able to open up those files unless you have direct access behind the scenes. So in a lot of cases, if you're playing, I don't know, say one of my Modifius rule sets, and you want to make a change with Modifius, unfortunately, that's a vaulted rule set. So there's not a whole lot you can gain access to do things. Now you can go and request um, uh, some information from us, depending upon what you're trying to accomplish. We may offer you that information. Like for instance, if you want to do some localization, change some labels to more of your local language, we will provide um, the string files, so you can go in and change those strings and make a simple extension to do so. Um, Now, this is why I'm going to go recommend two rule sets you want to really investigate. Actually, pretty much one. Um, is the core RPG rule set. That's a base rule set that I'd say majority of the rule sets that are currently on our platform are based off of. Like think of core as literally the ground floor foundational system that everything's kind of built off of, right? And the second one would probably be 5e. Third would probably be 3.5e, and then I would say actually those are probably the list that I would kind of go with. Um, in that order. The reason I say core RPGs again because it's foundational. You'll get a lot of your base templates out of there, your base structure of how Fantasy Grounds is set up, and then you can kind of expand on it, not rewrite it, so to speak. 5e will show you an example of what a layered rule set looks like on top of core RPG, and the same thing for 3.5e. Now, the reason I'm mentioning 3.5e is because 5e is really dedicated to 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Um, and it's also kind of the newest, I wouldn't say the newest. I just say it's the most modern rule set we currently have that's available to the public. 3.5e has some older ideas that break things down at a more basic, I wouldn't say basic level, but kind of a more easier understand level. Like you're not having to jump from like 5 different files to understand why that process is in place. Um, 3.5e is a good place to start, but I would not end there. I would kind of look at 5e, especially for certain functionality that you might want to replicate. And it also gives you some more design philosophies that you might encounter to help you understand something more, I'd say, more difficult, more structured towards the abstract. Okay, so for file structure, that's what I would kind of at least get comfortable getting to this place, know what the contents of those folders are, how to create and set up what I call development campaigns, things along those lines. So that's first. The next thing that I want to cover is the file structure of Core RPG entirely. So if I go to rule sets and I go to Core RPG, so from here, Core RPG has a certain structure and there's a reason behind every one of these folders. Okay. So the first one is campaign. Campaign contains basically anything that is a campaign record, right? And what I mean by that is like your character sheets, those are campaign records. NPC sheets, those are campaign records. Um, your spells, I mean, anything you could think of that could possibly be a record that you want to contain like items, NPCs, powers, spells, and special abilities, skills, feats, things like that. Um, these are these contain all of the structures for those. Now, CoreRPG is nice enough to provide us with a lot of um, records already. And then when I load up, say I want to load up CoreRPG here. So Core RPG, the reason why I want you to go over Core RPG, going back to what my original recommendation, is to see how these all function. So if you look at an NPC sheet, now this is an NPC sheet. Now this is a campaign record. This fits the whole structure of how to build this is under campaigns. It's under record underscore NPC.xml, right? Now, if I wanted to add things or remove things from this, I know now where to look in Core RPG to remove that. I can do the same thing for my own rule set file to kind of remove those things. Um, and you can then start to see how all this kind of works together from that structure. So anything that kind of shows up on the right hand side tends to be a campaign record, right? Except for anything under the library. Library is more of a like a train station of sorts. Like it brings you to the modules, it brings you to your assets, and then of course your sound sets. These aren't campaign records per se. Um, and you might find them under the campaign just because they show up um, under like under that structure, but they won't be linked to an actual record per se. Like when I click on characters and I create a new character sheet, this is now a campaign record that I've created. Okay. But the window, when I click on it, is not a campaign record. It's kind of like it's just a window to help me make my decision and go forward with it. Notes, all of these I click on are campaign records. Um, and then the same thing for images. Anything in the sidebar under images is now a campaign record, and how it functions, things along those lines. Um, Parcels, those are campaign records. So you kind of get the idea. Now, where was I? Oh yeah. So going through that, the campaign basically contains all those templates, all those window classes, and controls that make up these records. Okay. Common is common templates. Best way I can explain is think of like the combo box or um, uh, can't think of anything else off the top of my head. Combo box kind of always pops in my head when I think of common. But any kind of template that's created to help you to do something more specialized. And a lot of the reason why we layer on top of Core RPG is for a lot of reasons. The common and the CT, the desktop and party sheet. I think Ref too. Yeah, it builds a lot of that foundational stuff that kind of is like the features for Fantasy Grounds, right? And uh, for building our records, which most extension developers kind of I mean, if I was first starting out, I kind of focus on campaign, manipulating what I'm seeing on the screen, what kind of data is being stored, that kind of stuff. That's kind of where campaign comes into place. Common is going to help us if I want to build new controls, but I also don't want to reinvent a control. Like, let's go check out CoreRPG and see what kind of common templates are there to see if it will actually fulfill the task that I need it to do, right? The CT is the combat tracker. So if we go back to our core RPG, that folder contains everything you need for this window to display, all right, and function and do combat. Now there are other helper script files that go along with this, but this window is stored there. So if you want to make any changes to your combat tracker window, that's the folder you want to do. The other window would be also, let's see, open window. What is it? Combat tracker client. As you saw, right, what I just did there is a slash command. So you can do some nifty little slashes um, that are listed here, and there are also some that aren't listed that we don't want people to really play with too much. But if these are kind of like short something you can type out shortcuts, get something going. I can open up any window class in this in the rule set, which is simply using / open window. I give the name of the window class and then the data path that I want to do. And data path would be like an address that you want to that is located in your campaign. So I typed combat tracker because that is the parent node for your combat tracker. That doesn't change, doesn't go away. It's always consistent. So this window opens up all the time. Now, if I did say open window, chart sheet, and I don't put in any kind of node at all, it's going to open up an empty character sheet that's not linked to anything. There is no character sheets loaded currently. This is blank. This doesn't do anything because I didn't give it a database node to store that information for future purposes. But if I, click on this and then I find out what the data path for this particular character is, I can open that up anytime I want using that slash command. So that is actually a very good slash command to learn, um, along with these other ones that I'll go over here soon. Um, let's see. So I got that. Yeah. So the next folder is the desktop. So think of the desktop as anything that is sitting on the desktop. The modifier box, if you're in 5e, all those nice little buttons and widgets that you can click on. The chat frame, that is part of the desktop. The dice window, there's a character list window up here for when you connect, like if a player connects to you, you see those nice portraits in the top left hand corner. Um, those are the desktop, including the sidebar, which is this whole right hand side. Um, this whole right hand side is the sidebar, and it's built using a very lengthy script file that handles a whole bunch of goodies. Um, I wouldn't tackle the sidebar until you can really get more towards the intermediate level of coding within Fantasy Ground. It's not a novice task. Setting this up and organizing it. Now, the registration methods and setting like a new campaign record, those are very easy. Setting that kind of stuff up is actually really easy. And I actually think I might go over that since that's a very simple task for later. So let's go back here. The graphics file folder contains all of your graphics, like any kind of image, or so say for instance um, these icons on these buttons, they get defined and displayed within the rule set. Those are defined there and set up. The fonts are set up there. So if you wanted to say start working on a theme and you wanted say character selection to no longer be this yellow, but you wanted it to be like I don't know hot pink, you would go into and find the font, change the font color to whatever you would like it to be. Now, I'm going to show you one of our slash commands here to kind of give you an idea of how to get that information. When you hit debug on, you get this nice little window that's more of like a properties inspector. So when I scroll over the character selection, it tells me what the control is. It's called title. And then it tells me what the frame is. It's called window title. It also gives us these numbers are um, kind of like the width and the height. So if I change it, you see how the number in the right, and then if I move it, the numbers on the left change because that's where it's located currently on the desktop. Is at 612 264. Now, if I want to change the height, you see how the width and the height changes. Right. So think of it like X, Y, and W and H. Right. So from there, it also tells you what kind of like what type of control it is. Now, we're going to get to the section. We might not be able to cover everything here, but there is a section on. Um, let's see. I think it's under the API reference stuff. Yeah. So if you go under the controls here, this shows you all of the base controls within Fantasy Grounds. And I'm talking like every template is based off of one of these controls, right? And it's built up to do something entirely different. Like the combo box, it's made of actually a couple different controls to function properly. But like every number box is either a number control or a number field. I'll go quickly over this in a second, just so I don't overload you with information. But I just wanted to kind of show you where to find this information if we don't cover it for whatever project you're kind of working on. If you're using this as a guideline to get started. So let's go back to the files overview. Nope. Wrong one. Where is it? Ooh. Yeah, data files. Sorry. All right. So the next one is PS, or the party sheet. All of the files related to the party sheet are located there. So if I click on the party sheet, all these nice windows right here, that's where it's located. Um, and one thing I like to kind of explain as I'm breaking this stuff down, if you're working in those areas, your file should go in those folders just to help like other developers keep track. Like if I'm helping, say you come out and ask me, "Hey, I'm trying to add this nifty new tab to the party sheet that I think is going to be super awesome," right? My group's going to love it. Well, if your file is not located in the party sheet folder, I won't know where it is. So this is why I'm kind of breaking down the file structure first, because you kind of want to know where to put things so that you can collab with other developers. Um, it just makes it easier for all of us to kind of work together on that. So that's why I'm kind of going over this whole process. The next one is ref. Now, ref covers a lot of like reference lists, reference windows. So, give you an example would be this. If I click on by type for vehicles, it creates these type of windows, and then basically gives you a lot more along those aspects. These are kind of these like utility windows. I don't want to use utility. Actually, we have our own thing for utility, but they cover a lot of basis that isn't kind of linked to something else within the sidebar. So if you want to create some of these nice little reference windows for all the data that's coming up into here, like say let's call this the Model T. Now, and I give it let's call it a land vehicle with a cost of $120. Is I say 50 pounds. Speed is 25 mph, and I give a whole bunch of things. As you can see, it doesn't update until we click on it, and now so it organizes our master index in a more directed view, if you want to kind of go with that. Um, and these reference windows are great if you want to give some quick overview windows for the data. So as a player, I like to use this because master index is more for the GM. But I mean, don't get me wrong, you can search and filter and all that kind of stuff. But what if I created a ship now and I called it the Titanic, and it's a sea vehicle, and we give all this information? Let's say this is 6 million. Uh, yeah, $6 million. Let's do that. Million. The weight is like 1,200 tons. The speed is, I think it was like 40 knots. Could be wrong, but let's rehash that. And as you can see, this shows me some more stylized table view of the master index. So that's what the ref windows are for. And again, you can decide to use them, to expand upon them, or even create your own, depending upon how you do it. Let's see. Scripts. Scripts are the global scripts. Now, I can't really illustrate this, but an example, like I can't show you here, but an example of a global script would be something along the lines of like your attack rolls, your damage rolls, which all fit under the action manager. Um, let's see if I can actually do this. Yeah, actually, I can do it here. Global scripts. There you go. So if you look at these do all that fancy functionality that we like to tote around. It handles the chat, it handles any colors. Desktop manager, that's what creates the sidebar and does a lot of other nifty things related to the desktop. The decal manager handles building, adding the decal, our nice little SmiteWorks symbol when you first load up. The desktop is more for building a lot of this stuff, like the desktop widgets and things along those lines. Dice Manager handles the dice, all the nice little comfy dice stuff here. It also handles a lot of any kind of custom dice rolls you need to build, like the D66. or Facci dice or fudge or anything that you need to kind of handle that kind of sit under there. Dice roll manager. Dice roll manager sets up the skins for the dice. Kind of replace it. Like if I wanted to roll this, but I want it to show fire, I can actually register and also change what skin displays when I roll the 3D dice. That's what that manager does. Dice skin manager builds those lists, right? For the skins so that I can use it with the dice roll manager. Export manager, it's for when you want to export. It it has all the functions and ability to take all your campaign records and then create a module on the back end. Let's see. Import utility manager. It's the opposite of export. It helps you import records like NPC records, character sheets, things along those lines. Library data. Library data is a very, very important global script file. What the library data does is it sets up the campaign records that will display over here, right? Right now, CoreRPG has a whole bunch of nifty all this stuff set up already, so you can see examples of how to set that up inside your new rule set or even extension. So if you want to add, say, to 5e a new record type that handles, I don't know, botany, potion making, or something like that, right? Um, if you want to create that record, you'll have to use the library data script file to kind of help you along with that, or at least give you an idea of how to build that structure. List manager it handles all those ref list windows. That's where I tend to kind of go in. Module manager, I think that's self-explanatory. OOB is the manager that handles so if I connect as a player and I want to do a roll that basically damages an NPC, I'll need OOB because a player who connects has no actual control over the database. They don't have a right to. So OOB basically sends the roll or sends the task to the GM, and then it runs off the GM's machine, acting like it's the host, right? So that's what that particular manager does, and you'll see that when you crack open 5e and you go in and look at if you follow the breadcrumb trail of the manager, at some point it handles everything up to the point where it needs to make a change within the database, like for instance, giving you wounds. And then once it gets there, it hands it off to the OOB manager to then uh, send it to basically to the host to then finish the task, which is then set up those wounds and change different things about the NPC and things along those lines, like adding effects and um, maybe even outright killing it, things along those lines. Options manager handles the options, anything that shows up here. These are global flags for the system. So if I turn off Ring on Whisper, it when it performs a task that needs to call on that, it kind of checks it and says, "Oh, is this on or is this off?" And then kind of branches off from there. Um, I didn't realize how many there were. I mean, this is ridiculous sometimes. Let's see. Record manager handles. Um, these are a lot of these are new. But record manager, record share manager, they handle a lot of the tasks related to records themselves. Um, trying to think of an example, like if I want to find this record, that I think there's a function in there that helps you find it. Um, I can't really give you a huge breakdown of that. It's still kind of brand new. It's fairly new, but there are some interesting functions in there that you can play with. So, like for instance, you can open a record index, right? That's the master index. Every time I click on one of these buttons, it opens up the master index. That's what this is called. It's an index and it's master of that particular record type. So that means it loads only the records that are items for your campaign, right? Well, this particular function will be called, and then you'll basically open that window related to that particular file type. There's also finding records through Lua scripting, and then there's also you can also basically have a particular record type be thrown through a function, and it will actually then perform whatever function you kind of want it to run through. Same thing, kind of. There's a whole bunch of nifty little utilities in here that you can kind of play with. Um, let's see. Record share manager is about sharing those records. And again, these have a whole bunch of nice little functions related to that task. Sound manager Sirenscape, and sound manager file. They're all related to the sound system that shows up here, and also particularly to these sound sets. Okay, so whenever you're using one of these tasks, those are those are the global functions that kind of help make that happen. String manager helps you with your strings. Something along the lines of, let's see, like, you can check to see if it starts with this particular character, ends with a particular character, is word, is phrase, is number string, things along those lines. I highly recommend, without me kind of going through every single one of these files, um, investigate it on your own. See what those. Back to what I was originally beginning with is, don't reinvent the wheel. Don't try and come up with some new code that's already been uh, gathered, right? That's been created for those tasks. And CoreRPG has these in these global functions, right? So if you're trying to do something where you're trying to check to see if this particular string has the letter A in it, I might you go to string manager to help me assist with that, instead of trying to come up with some fancy new Lua script that's going to do exactly the same thing, but possibly even be longer, not as performance impactful, and it might cause problems, and just go through the whole process. String UTF-8 manager, I'm not really too sure. I don't really play with this too much. User manager, that deals with any time a player connects to you. That's kind of what the user manager kind of does. Utility manager is a catch-all for anything that kind of doesn't fit with everything else. Version manager, that it helps. Version manager and version manager 2 kind of help you, like with the whole vampire revamp. Now, changed the rule set extensively, and when I wanted to get a old vampire campaign up to this current rule set, I used that code to help me perform those tasks. Now, again, I'm telling you more along the lines of what I use these strip files for. Um, there's other reasons for this, but generally speaking, it's just this is an overview of when you load images, convert files, things like that, to help get the campaign data in line with the current version of the rule set. It runs like almost like the first script file as you load in. Window Manager handles all of the window tasks. So if, like, for instance, remember that command I typed earlier, open window, that is actually a window manager script that I can call anytime in my code, right? To make it open up a window, close a window, find a control on this window, things along those lines. Um, and then again, as you can see, we could be here for a whole day going through all of these nice script files. But important ones are Actor Manager. Let's focus on this one. Actor Manager. Let's see what else. Combat Manager. That's another good one. Uh, Game System. Yeah, I say Game System's pretty good. And then let me look. And I think that'd be it. Those two kind of tend to be a lot of what I see on the Forge is related to those particular script files. Actor Manager handles um, basically telling the system that when I drop this particular record, this NPC file, test one, right? When I drop this on the combat tracker, it knows that this is a combat actor record, right? It's telling me, hey, I can tell the system, hey, this particular record, when I drop it, I want it to basically be dropped to the combat tracker and do something, right? and then you can also dictate what other functions related to that as well. Um, so actor manager, in conjunction with combat manager, make that task happen, right? And a lot of these also interact with each other. Token manager with image manager, things along those lines. So, like I said, you might want to crack open CoreRPG, check out some of these global functions, especially with the little knowledge I've given you on that structure, and see, like, if I'm working in the desktop, maybe I want to look in desktop manager, or if I'm working with a dice roll, maybe I want to see if I can get the skin to show to what I want it to be through the dice roll manager, things along those lines. That's kind of how you want to attack these kind of problems when you move forward with it. Let's do this. Kill that. All right. So that's what the script files are. So if you have anything that is what we consider a global script, you want to have it in there. Strings are just simple string declarations. So if I go to strings, so say for instance, for your localization individuals that want to kind of put, like, say, fans grounds in Spanish. If I change, let's see, something that we can run into very much. Let's look. How about this? We change items. It's not in here. Let's go under campaign. All right. Where's the library files? That'll be under common. There. So used to building my own my own files at this point. Nope, no library there. Let's see. Okay, I found one we can work with. So say I wanted to change it from character to, say, soldiers, right? Now I'm changing the actual core RPG files for my on my particular system, right? So if I reload this and I now go to the character selection screen, let's see what the title says. Now it says soldier selection. Now, does that mean that I changed everything to soldier now moving forward? No. Just it's just a tag. It's a title. It's a string that I can go in here and I can call it whatever I want, right? So that's what these files are for. So if your goal is just to change labels on things, you might focus on these files and just set up your own string files and make an extension for it. And then the best way to find this stuff is also to try to find out where, like, for instance, as point out here with the debug screen, I can find this particular control, see what string file is associated with it, and then go into search uh, my core RPG folder, and then try to kind of find that particular string resource declaration. Um, so as you can see, I can go in here to make a change. It now displays I did something. I made a change to fans grounds. Now I put it back to the way it was. If I reload it and then I click here, guess what? It's back to normal, right? So if I make changes to the core RPG though, and I get an update, all my changes go bye-bye, because when it updates those files, it will wipe out those changes and then add in what our update patch system tells you it should be moving forward. So that's why we have extensions, and that's why we have rule sets, because then you can then kind of make it your own, and it never will change until you make those changes. Let's see. Next one would be tokens. Basically anything related to the token, like the health bars, conditions, any of those, like, nifty little widgets you see on the token on a map. That's what you'll see. Utility windows are everything else, like, for instance, the option window, effects window, modifier window, the calendar. They all sit under there. Okay, so um, they're kind of like a catch-all for everything else that doesn't have a defined place. To be honest with you, so that's the file structure. that when you look at Core or look at 5e or 4e, 3.5, any of those open rule sets that we have currently available, you'll now know what those folders kind of contain and why those files are particularly there. Okay. Um, so there. Now let me kind of break down one thing for you before we start going into opening it up for questions. I want to kind of leave a half an hour for questions. But one thing I always recommend is when if you want to start a new extension or a new rule set, first thing you want to do is create a new folder. Now, I've already done that. I can't show you my file structure. There's a lot of nifty little secret projects that unfortunately I just can't have on the internet at the moment. So I've already gone and already created that folder within my Fantasy Grounds setup. And then I also created a file by the name of extension.xml, right? And the reason that I wanted to show you this is because I can actually create an extension for CoreRPG right now to do something differently. So, like for instance, I think they showed. Interesting. Let's see. Is it under here? Nope. They give you code snippets that actually are really nice. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Yeah. So what I usually do, well, not I don't do it anymore because I have basically a template that I can work off of. But what I do is I'll basically grab all of this all the way down to here. I'll copy it, or I can click this nice little button, copy as text. Come over here, come in here, paste it, and then I can start coding away, right? I can actually change all of this. I don't need I'll need this so I can then comment it out, right? Actually, this is I don't like these. There you go. There we go. Yep. There we go. Super. All right. So we have a name for this particular extension. We'll call it FGA test. We don't have a version number, so we'll just call it version 1. You put your name because I'm making this. We'll keep it as Smitworks. And the description. Now, description can be anything. So it would be for testing purposes for FGA, right? Now, rule set will define what rule set I want this extension to load into. Okay. And basically, we want it just for core RPG. Okay. So now I have this set up that it's going to now load. Let's change the announcement. Let's see. We'll change it to awesome extension that Playrun wants. And I can also change the font that I want to display in and then the icon. Right now, I want to keep it as core RPG. So I have all this, right? Now I come back to my my thing. Yeah, I know. Go away. Let's see. Load campaign. Now let's go into this. There we go. FGA test. Now I've loaded now I can actually then click on FGA test and now I have it, right? And as you can see, my chat output shows that I've loaded this extension. As you can see, there's nothing in it. It doesn't do anything, right? I haven't told it to do anything yet. Now, if I create a character sheet, I want, let's see, let's say I want to grab this. I want this on the main tab, right? Say just for whatever reason, I don't want this showing up on the notes tab. I want this showing up the main tab. So what I do is I would search. Now, mind you, I did probably skip over one thing. For your development environment, I use Vim. I'm a Linux user, so I use Vim for all of my development. You can use Notepad++. That's the highly recommended one to get started. You just need like some sort of text editor that allows you to search within files across many folders, right? Like a project folder. So the popular ones are Notepad++. You can use Sublime Text if you're inclined. That's the way you want to go. You can use honestly, I think Atom was another one. It's Atom. Atom's another good one that I've seen people use. You could use normal Notepad, but you won't have any search features. But you could use that particular program to create these files if you want to. Another one would be I don't know if I want to say VS Code. But like any IDE that can open up these files and do things, because we use actual proper programming languages like Lua. Lua is a scripting language. XML is the database and control structure for our program. As you can see here, this is an XML file. As you can see with the name that's at the bottom there. So if I type in tags, it follows this normal XML structure. If this is all not comfortable for you at this moment, I would highly suggest also then changing kind of gears here and then going over and start looking over learning a little bit about XML and then learning a little bit about Lua as we start going through this part of the demonstration. Because you're going to need to understand kind of the structure. Like I've created a tag here, properties, and then under properties I have a tag for name, version, author, description, and then I have a rule set tag. Now the program's going to look for this kind of information and then do something with it, right? Same here with root and all that kind of jazz. And then as you can see here, I commented it out, include source file because I'm going to need that later. I'm going to include some files maybe in my project. So I always comment it out just so I can just copy it and then I can change the the location of where it's sitting. Okay. So that's why I suggest kind of if this is starting to look a little bit like I don't know what I'm seeing here, maybe we stop here and then go do some more research on those particular programming languages just to get at least comfortable at knowing what you're seeing when you're going through those files. Um, so anyway, so we set this up, and now I want to grab. Let's see. Let's see. That's extension still. RPG. Yep. And then let's do. Okay. So let's run the base. So I wanted to make a change on the main tab and the notes tab, right? So I kind of use my properties instruction. So if you look, it's under chart sheet main, right? So let's go to chart sheet main. Well, how do I find chart sheet main? I can do a search using my text editor, but because I know where it's located, I can go right to it. So it's record char. Now, the character sheet is built up by these particular files, okay? And as you can see, record char is the parent window, right? And I can know that by just going into the file, and now I see the window class char sheet. And if I want to go to char main, it's under char main, char sheet main. So it matches this particular window. Now the window is actually right under the header here, all the way to the right, all the way to the down until we get to the very bottom. So that's the char sheet main. Now when I click on abilities, it's now char sheet abilities. Now if I click on inventory, that's char sheet inventory. I go to notes, as you can see, it kind of goes through that. So if I want to basically make a change for chart sheet main, I'm going to grab this entire window class, right? Pop it over here, and then paste it. Oh, it didn't grab it right. Okay. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so this window class is now right where I want it to be. Okay. That's driving me nuts. Okay, so I can do two things. I can create a file and declare it with an include source, or I can just throw the window class right into the base, right? And from here, this now has the exact structure as the original Core RPG one. I don't need all this. I don't need to change all of this. The only thing I need to focus on is, what do you think, Layron? What do you think I need to change?
Just the part that has to do with switching out the
Might be
windows.
napping. I might have put people to sleep. I apologize. I know this can get a little bit
I'm here.
dusty
I'm
in terms of
here.
explanation. So I just need the attribute frames because, again, I don't want to remove any of this. I just want to move it down so I can move this bad boy onto the main tab.
Right.
So first off, I can just do this. Oops. I can do merge equals join. That's another. That's a flag type I would highly recommend learning, is merge join, merge delete, merge replace. And I think that's it. I think merge replace is only for window lists, but merge delete and merge join are very important for extension developers, because I don't need it now that I did that. I don't need this. All of this down here. I just need this. I just need
Okay.
the attribute frame. That's it. That's this window right here. If the property inspector's not telling me that, but if I looked, I can tell what's everything attached to. It's this attribute frame. I want to change it, so back over here, and let's look at notes. How much space do we need? Okay, so I want to do this. I want to actually grab all of this. Oops, I need the whole window class. Apologies. And I just close it off. So now I have both the window classes that I need to work with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to do the same thing here as well. It's merge join. Then from here, I can do merge delete. And I can do this actually. I can actually, we need this stuff before we I always get ahead of myself. I apologize. So we need this. We need all of this. So we're going to do this, and we're going to now paste this down here. We're going to need to add this. Remember, we're moving this from the notes tab to the main tab. But now, once I have it all grabbed, I can come over here and go merge equals delete. And then I use the / to basically end the tag. And I can do the same thing over here. I basically do the same thing. Delete, because we don't want this showing up anymore. So I'm just going to sit here. Now, this is one way of doing it. I could also just create my own window class. But remember, if you're using an extension, you don't want anything else to kind of change. You want to kind of inherit everything that's coming from CoreRPG. So that's where the merge comes in, right? So now delete. Delete you. And then I know I'm doing it very slow, but I want to make sure I'm illustrating what I'm doing. I do this much quicker. All right. So my extension right now goes in and deletes this stuff from the notes tab. And I have it create this stuff. And then also I want to change. So I want to actually merge join on here. Equals join, because I want to change where it's going to sit, right? So I need it to go now. If you look at the bounds is x, y, w, h, right? So it's the x coordinate, the y coordinate, the width, and then the height. Okay. So you also can think of it like the four squares of the 4 squares of the direction. So I needed to go 50. I wanted to go 50 down from where I am, but I also want to change I don't want to change anything else. So I have this extension done. Now, if I reload it and I open characters, look at that. Look at that. Now I'm going to have to probably go back further and adjust the appearance, move that up, languages, move that up, depending upon what I want to do with this. But as you can see, with one simple extension, right? Again, this is, I don't know how many lines. Hold on. Let's see. I'd say roughly about 50 some lines of code, right? I have moved functionality from one window to another, right? And the reason why this will all work, so if I already had data already in here, and it would already work because the database is going to pull that information from the character sheet node, right? So it's all going to display correctly. So if you just want to move stuff around, as long as you keep the same naming and the same control information, it's going to work as long as you never don't change anything. Okay. And as you can see, I made a simple change that my players are now going to be happy because my particular table says, you know what, oh, we don't like it on the notes. We want it on our main tab, right? And I haven't even gotten into the parts where we start to add attributes, skills, things along those lines. But it shows you how powerful a very simple extension can go, right? And then the same thing for rule set files. Now, if I go over to my rule set, now we're going to change a little gear here. Now I'm making a rule set here. Now extensions are very small things, right? They're not supposed to be huge projects in their own right. Rule sets are almost like a full global environment that you're changing. Like I'm in core now. If I go over to 5e, 5e is a whole rewrite of this. I wouldn't say a whole rewrite, but there's a lot of significant changes to the system. Okay. So now if I go over to rule set, they should have an example file. There we go. And I come back over here and then I paste it. And guess what? I just created a rule set called test system just by simply copying and pasting the information from the wiki, right? So if you want to get started, this is the place to go, right? You have a start here. You're good to go. Now I'm ready to go. But let's change it to FGA test rule set, right? And then the text is FGA rule set. Author, we'll just do SmiteWorks because that's just habit for me at this point. And then the most important thing is to make sure you have this declared because now you're layered on top of CoreRPG. You inherit everything from CoreRPG, everything. Any of those files, right, that we just went over are now going to be loaded into your rule set without you doing a thing. Okay, so when I load this rule set up, I will actually be functioning within CoreRPG. But then I can then also now um, I can do the same thing here. I can include this file, make changes to it. Now I've done basically an extension, but I'm doing it on like a ton of files at that point. Basically, that's what a rule set file is a very large extension. It does a lot of things. It's a more focused extension, basically, in a nutshell. So that's why when I show this off, there are some differences, like the way the properties are set up. As you can see, there are no properties anymore. You just have a description, import rule set, and then I can start basically setting up my files more or less. So if I come over here, you can see an example, right? This is an entire base.xml file for a rule set. And as you can see, look at all the changes I did to CoreRPG within. Oh no, this is CoreRPG. Excuse me. Let's do. Let's do. 5e. I think I can do that. All right, so let's look at the differences. Okay, and as I said, remember the differences between an extension and a rule set, right? Extension very small. I made 2 changes for the CoreRPG system, right? I just swapped where that particular frame was sitting and all its controls that contained inside of it. Okay, 5e changes all of this. All of these files are changed or added to the system to make 5e happen, so to speak, right? So that's why that's where the distinction comes from. If your extension starts to actually do like a lot of things, I don't think you're playing 5e anymore at that point. You're doing something else, right? You're playing your game, right? And if you're getting it from multiple sources, yes, a lot of extensions may cause problems overall because you have a lot of different hands trying to make 5e more to your liking, right? But a rule set file, it handles basically the whole ecosystem for the rule set you're trying to create, right? That's why a lot of people in the past have asked me, well, when do I just stop making an extension and make a rule set at that point? Well, that's where you have to kind of make it. You got to make that distinction yourself. Like, is this going to be like if I want, like, say I have 5 particular extensions I constantly love to play with, right? But I created them. Now, mind you, I'm not going to recommend this for other authors' extensions, but say I created, say that extension I just created for FG Test, and I want that to work all the time, right? I don't want to have to keep loading an extension to make that a reality, right? So I can then create a new extension, or I mean, new rule set, and then just include that new code and replace the things that I don't want in that particular system. So, like for instance, if I don't like the current way the character sheet's laid out, well, I can make a whole extension to change the character sheet. But if I also want to change the NPC sheet, I want to change the parcels, I want to change the quests, I want to change the story, maybe it might not be the same rule set anymore at that point. You see what I'm saying? So, and
Hmm.
plus, you kind of you if you're doing a lot of homebrew, you definitely might want to consider maybe making a rule set. But the main focus for rule sets is kind of keeping it focused to a particular rule system and then staying put, right? You want it kind of contains the same dice rolls, it kind of contains the same information. So there's no clear like line where you draw in the sand and say, you know what, this is now a rule set or this is now an extension, right? I always start with extensions and then I go from there, right? I build out. I mean, you could technically build an entire rule set out of an extension file. You can build an extension out of a rule set file. It's just it has its purposes, right? It kind of keeps you in the mindset of what you want to focus on moving forward. Okay. Um, Other than that, actually, it looks like it's getting to be. I went over my time. I apologize. There's just so much information. I might actually do another one to expand on it, especially if we get a lot more questions. But I'll open up the rest of the time for questions moving forward. I'm sorry, Leron.
No, that's
There's
okay.
just so much information to try to relay in a very short time span.
Right. So, other than some common mistakes I notice
Mhm.
is maybe there's some misconception. So, looking at this from top down, so you have a extension potentially, then you have the rule set, then you have core. Is that correct?
Right. Well, if you layer on top, if the rule set's layered on top of core, yes,
Okay.
that's the hierarchy in a way.
Okay.
So you start with, like for instance, as I showed you here, second you add this line, you're
Hmm.
now layered on top of core. So
Okay.
I'm building something that basically precedes all extensions, right? So that means that say I decide to import 5e, right? Guess what? Now I'm building on top of 5e, which is then built on top of CoreRPG. So you got to look at it at that direction. Now, here's where the little mix-ups come in is that I'm building a rule set that's technically an extension at this point because I'm extending 5e into a whole new rule set,
Right.
forking the code more or less.
Hmm.
Um, but I also inherit any new changes from 5e. I also inherit any new changes from Core RPG. So
Right.
there is pluses and cons. There's pros and cons for every process. You just got to find the one that fits for your particular project.
Got it.
That's why if I'm building a brand new spanking new rule set that has no linkage to any other system, and I want it to do exactly what I want it to do, I'm just going to layer it on top of Core.
Yeah.
Then this set of code will run. First, CoreRPG's code will run. Then my rule set code will run, and any other extensions I've built on top of that.
Yeah.
So, and then there's also another uh, tag here called load order that needs to be considered as well for extension developers, because load order tells you when a particular set of code is going to run when it pulls all the extensions in, right?
Yeah.
And if your code, I always get this mixed up. I apologize if I'm wrong. It's either, I think it's the highest number goes first, lowest number goes last. I can't remember. I apologize. It's one of, I don't really deal
Lowest
with
is
load
first.
order. I'm sorry.
Lowest is first.
Okay.
Okay, lowest is first. I apologize. It's just been a while since I dealt with load order. I don't really play in that area much anymore, and I always have to look it up. And but that's where, like, say if you have a conflict with, say I build an extension and I go and get, say, Silent Ruins polymorph extension, right?
Hmm.
Or I think it's wild shape polymorph extension. And I get that, and his code, his extension's throwing a lot of errors, right? Because maybe my extension's loading before his, and it's kind of injecting information that his code doesn't know what you're doing at that point. You might have to change the load order on your extension to kind of come after his, right?
Right.
It's kind of like a weird hopscotch kind of system. But it works. I mean, a lot of cases you might actually have to change your code a little bit. But if you focus on core RPG heavily as a starting point, you will get very strong with this. And again, you saw how fast and simple me creating a simple extension that just swaps some controls around. It cost me 50 lines of code and a simple little file with a .ext extension.ext, or excuse me, a extension.xml. So I can go, but again, I can also expand this. Instead of having this in the base, I can then include the source file, or create a script call for a global script within my base, and I can just have everything housed in other files within the campaign. And as you can see with the source file, it goes off of the root of the folder itself. So, like for instance, if I'm including this source, I'm including the source file that's located in the graphics folder called graphics underscore font .xml, right? And then I could put this all in a particular. I could grab it, create a whole new file, call it whatever I want. But I recommend sticking to the naming and also the structure for Core RPG, so that you know what you're replacing, and then the other developers can see what you're replacing as well, and
Okay.
then you can kind of go from there. But yes, those are the shortcomings, and like that's the structure, the hierarchy, moving from bottom to top would be core RPG, right? Especially if it's layered. If it's not layered, then it's the lowest at the low, right? And you're rebuilding everything, including desktop manager. You're rebuilding combat tracker from scratch. Why would you want to do that?
Right.
Unless you really, have a desire to do that. But if you're looking to, if you're looking to
Wait a minute.
inherit a lot,
That's a glutton for punishment, is what you're saying.
could be. I mean, but if you're just looking to just make a simple rule set or an extension,
Yeah.
use Core RPG. It's a great base, and it will give you a lot of information that it's kind of getting inherited from other things. And as you can see, with the simple merge join, I don't have to copy and paste the entire window class. I just have to just tell it, hey, I want to join this window class, but I only want to delete these things. Right? That's what this is telling the system. The same here is I'm joining it, but then I'm adding without a flag. I don't need a flag to join to add things. Now I could also tell it if it's related to anchoring. Say that I want to put it at the end of something that is in a line of anchors. I can do a flag going insert before, and then I give the name of the control. Could just be name, whatever it is. Or the other one is after, right? So I can add flags when I use the merge flag to kind of do. I can add these if it requires to be in a particular order, or loading. Like if this particular thing requires the name to function properly, the name control, then I want it to load after it, because then it'll error out every time it tries to load because it can't find the name if I'm trying to do it before the name. So, that kind of thing. So that's generally how this all kind of works. Now, mind you, you can, as a starter, a beginner, just copy and paste the entire window class and just make your changes just to get started. If you can't understand this particular concept, that's okay. Just start here, copy and paste it over, and make your changes. Where I just delete all of this, right? And then all that's left is what I want to see. Okay, that's a good beginner way of approaching that as well. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on a tangent
No,
related to your question, but it just kind of spotted out at me
right,
for something to kind of shout out to.
right. So when you're having somebody that's
You know,
new,
Hopefully that
something about
answered your
load
question.
order is you can actually see the load order in FG when it loads.
Yep.
So they will load. So as you see, CoreRPG loads first, and then like the
Yep.
higher the load order, the extensions will all load in that order. So you know what the
Yeah.
load order is in relation to everybody else by just looking at the chat.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Good shout out.
Yep. Okay.
Any other questions?
Let's see. I don't see any in the chat, but so you create?
No. So you see the order that it loads in
Yeah.
the chat?
Yep.
That's the load order. So if I have CoreRPG here and I'm loading 5e, right? You'll see CoreRPG, 5e, then any extensions below it.
I see.
They load in the order is what he's saying.
Yeah, it makes sense. So you create tech debt, right? When you start making a bunch of custom changes under the hood. So,
Yeah.
like if you make all your own controls and your own overrides that are contrary or different than core, then that's where is that like where you're getting your breakage more often with the extensions?
Most extension breakage is, at least nowadays, it's actually when we make changes. Like you were pointing out, basically, if because I joined here,
Mm-hmm.
if these actually no longer exist, this will actually error out.
Okay.
So when you do the merge join, at its higher level,
Yeah.
because you're gonna have to keep monitoring. Like if the character sheet changes, I need to know what actually changes,
Right.
because if this is no longer available on that notes tab,
Yeah.
and this will error out, and then my extension will throw an error, right? So you kind of, when you do it this method, it really makes you have to be a little bit more cautious and more eyeing up the updates as it comes in, because you're inheriting even further that you're taking what's already in core and you're just going to change it. You're not actually overriding it. Now, if
Okay.
I copy and paste the entire window class that's over here, say I copy and paste this entire thing, and then
Yeah.
I basically rewrite everything that's between the sheet data portions, the controls, and it literally changes everything. It doesn't inherit anything. It's replacing it all at
Right.
that point.
Right.
So that's where you kind of that's why I always suggest starting out just copying and pasting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because now there are pros and cons to every approach. Now the con for this approach, copying and pasting the entire window class, is you won't inherit all the new stuff that comes down the pipeline. You'll have to change your code to match what the new code is if you're going to do that, and then add in your own changes. That's where That's why merge join is actually a very powerful flag, because if, for instance, they decide to add like a health bar, for instance, to my token or my portrait on my character sheet in CoreRPG, well, I'm not changing anything related to the portrait or the token on my character sheet. I'm saying, hey, just give me that part of my extension. Okay, well, um, if you look, then that won't change. I will
Right.
inherit that stuff that changes to these two controls.
I see.
The only thing I'm changing is this. I'm adding this frame here and then just scooching this down a little bit. That's
Right.
it. That's all I'm
Right.
changing. Right.
Right.
So when you're also developing extensions, make sure when you do that, if you're going entirely against the grain, realize that you're going in uncharted territories. You're going into places that your extension might just break because it's just not intended to do that sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the two levels kind of come into place is copying and pasting. It just completely replaces it. So if I don't want the character sheet to look anything like this, and I don't want these tabs here, I'm gonna have to replace the entire character sheet, and that starts at the very top of it with record char, right? And if
Mm-hmm.
you look at the naming conventions, that we kind of show you that this file is actually part of this file, the one on the top, right? Because we use the underscore and we kind of say, okay, this is the main file, this is the abilities file, this is the inventory file, notes file, and it's all part of this record char file. Which if we open that up, you can see this is actually what builds the whole character sheet.
Right.
Is there's a sub window here called main that is looking for a window class called char sheet main, and then so on and so forth. And then here's the tab system that builds those tabs along the right hand side. Okay, and then what window is it associated with? What icon is it associated with? Because the vertical tabs are actually icons. They're not strings, right? So if you're looking to also if you're a string person looking for localization, you're going to have to create a whole new image file for this tab, replacing the text that's inside of it.
I see.
Okay. Now if they're horizontal tabs along the top, it's a simple string file that you just need to change.
Right.
So yeah, so that basically is where I think a lot of pitfalls come from.
Mm-hmm.
Is number one, just understand what the pros and cons of both systems are, and then realizing what you're gaining or what you're losing based on those two approaches. That hey, I'm going to gain all the benefits of all those changes for main if I use merge join, but if I'm changing something and say all my attributes and skills in this window look weird, well, that's probably because it's associated with my changes over here. So I'm gonna have to do
Right.
some tweaking and some refinement there.
I
But
got
then
it.
also back up here, if say we decide to redesign the notes tab, and this is no longer here, it might throw an error, you know,
Right.
and then you might actually, you might not even need this code anymore at that point.
Right.
If you're going to go heavy into creating a lot of forge extensions, things like that, you're going to have to keep an eye on any kind of new updates that change structures within CoreRPG, because a lot of rule sets developers have to keep their eyes on it. A lot of high-end extension developers, and when I mean by high-end is like people that have cranked out like 20 odd extensions, or they're making
Right.
lots of sales with them. They're constantly have to pleasing their clientele by making those changes and keeping up with our code base.
Right. I got a question. So if I was a extension writer, is there an easy way or easier way to do a comparative thing? So, like, for instance, if a new release has come out and I have some code, is there a way to compare and show the changes without having to dig through the entire string?
That would be up to your text editor or
Okay.
IDE. Yeah.
Okay.
I have Vim. I have ways of doing side by side comparisons.
Mm-hmm.
I also have access to the internal systems. I can see differences from what I'm
Right.
downloading. So I don't really have to rely on that as
Right.
much for the general public. But you would have to do some sort of like file comparison system
Okay.
to do that. And what I would suggest is before you update, you make copies of the stuff
Right.
that you are replacing.
Right. That's what I'm
Um,
getting at. Because
mhm.
I think for troubleshooting purposes, I mean, most developers are probably looking at the error code and just kind of going to that point. But I think
That's a good step. I mean,
yes,
if
of
I throw,
course, that's a
yeah,
logical step. But if you want to know like all the changes that occurred, or most of them that have occurred, before you start writing another extension that's based off of what you're already working on, or something that you assumed was good yesterday,
right.
it'd be much more advantageous to have a comparison model instead of just winging it.
Well, it's not always just winging it. I mean, the other thing you need to learn, and I'm glad you brought this up, because one of the other things you need to learn is how to read the console output. Right?
Hmm.
Like when you get an error, it's going to pop up here. right?
Yeah.
As you can see, you see how it says warning. Warnings are more for the developer to kind of go, hey, this could be a potential problem. Maybe you should
Right.
go and investigate it, right? And after I'd say the many years I've worked with the company so far, I've learned of the very popular error codes that pop up. Generally, come to something doesn't exist and it doesn't know what you're doing.
Okay.
That's where, like, whenever you see nil in the error message, that's what it tends to be. Something doesn't exist, or it can't find what you're telling it to do.
It
Right?
moved or it was
Um,
redefined, right?
exactly. Um, so, you look what the one thing about error messages, the way my debugging process works is I look at what is here and where it's located. Now, in some cases, that could be a potential problem. But let's go back to me loading up this debugging window, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I if I get an error and I don't understand what the error code is, I can actually get what they call a print stack, meaning it will show me the functions that it pops through and
Mm-hmm.
help me create a breadcrumb trail to find the actual issue.
There you go.
Um, and basically, if you leave that open and try to do it again, your console will now then be filled with all of the function points that you jumped through. Or most of the cases, most errors are related to Lua scripts, right?
Yeah.
And it'll hop you through from the buried errors all the way down to the first extension that it collects, right? And I forget how many functions it collects throughout this whole process, like the maximum number. So it won't go all the way to the beginning in some cases if you're jumping out a lot, but generally um, they'll give you at least a better understanding because you're like, oh, I know that function. Let me start there instead of all the way in the beginning, right?
Right.
And then I can work my way down because especially if I run into a script error that I'm not aware of, I'm like, what's what's widget change function? What's that do? Right? I
Right.
never even heard of that. And then most cases, what that comes out like what pops in my head when I go through my debug process is, oh, well, that could be a CoreRPG level one, especially if I'm building directly on top of CoreRPG and not using any extensions. It's got to be CoreRPG at that point. If it's not in my code, it's got to be in CoreRPG code.
Right.
And then you can kind of hunt down what the actual purpose of that code is, what it's looking for, and if I maybe am feeding the information wrong, or it's an actual bug with our system, that
Right.
kind of thing. So that happens from time to time.
Right. I noticed that sometimes Moon Wizard will publish a change log kind of thing, like
Hmm.
before in the test channel. So, like if you're looking at the laboratory and you want to know kind of what's coming up in the changes, sometimes he will publish kind of, I don't know if it's a warning or some kind of preview as to what you need to keep an eye on, sort of, so to speak.
Right.
So I see that, which is better than before, because I don't think they were doing that a few years ago. I don't.
Well, actually, to expand on your earlier question,
Mm-hmm.
about how to find differences.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's actually a pretty cool idea.
Mm-hmm.
Is the fact is that most of our changes go into the test server
Yep.
before it goes public, right?
Right.
So you can actually then load up your files from live, which is
Mm-hmm.
the base thing. Then go under your channels folder, go to test, and
Oh,
do a
okay.
side by side comparison or some differences programs. You just got to tell it what files you want to look at differences of,
Mm-hmm.
and and then basically you can put them side by side and you can see what was changed,
Right.
what was affecting that. So I'm sorry for going back, but
No, that
that
makes
is
sense. It
that's a good
does.
suggestion if you're looking at trying to stay up on the bleeding cutting edge of our system.
Right. I was just thinking of a way, like, how can you do a comparative without looking at the entire rule set, but also
Mhm.
just notating just the changes, you
And
know.
unfortunately, programs. You're going to need some sort of program. I think I
Honestly, a
did.
lot of us dump it all in Git,
Okay.
and we keep
Yeah,
the current one in Git, and then we take the test stuff and put it in a branch, and then do the compare between
Okay.
the two.
That's cool.
Then
yeah,
you
that's
get
an
a high
option.
level view
That's a
of
good way.
like, oh, this
Just make
is
sure
what's
it's a private
changing. Is it going to
repository.
affect what I have, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it
Yeah,
makes sense.
but make sure it's in a private repository. You can't make that public.
Right. Right. Okay, that's cool.
Um, yeah. So but the one thing I think the one thing out of this particular section to take out of is there's so many avenues and how you have to find your way of finding out that information and disseminating it and figuring out, does it affect me? If it does affect me, how do I change it? Plus, there's also avenues of reaching out to the laboratory forum, making a comment, right? If you're not understanding, I'm always, I would say most days, hanging out with Paulette in the hangout, right? Doing work and help fielding technical questions.
Yeah.
And I'm also available through the mod creation. You can make a post there. So there's lots of ways of gaining information. It's just simply taking the steps of reaching out if you're not sure. Like, we'll point you where to look, or if your thought process needs a rubber duck to bounce off of, you know, I'm okay with that. You can bounce as many ideas as you want off of me.
Right.
Heck, it helps my thought process sometimes, not thinking about what I'm doing.
Right.
And I go back to it. I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. I can do that.
So
Not saying I'm going to take your idea, but
yeah. So most extension writers just take an existing extension, kind of tear it apart, and see what it does and how it functions. But are there any other sorts of approaches that would help other than that? I mean, learning Lua and all that kind of comes with time. You can't master that in one go. But talking about like bounds, like for instance, the character sheets. Are there any published recommendations for bounds on sizing and that sort of thing, or is that just kind of embedded in the code?
I mean, you can make it as big as you want, but I always recommend to look at what's already been established. Like,
okay.
Like when I load up CoreRPG, believe it or not, this window, just me looking at it, is smaller than 5.8.
Right.
This character sheet, or this combat tracker, excuse me, starts out like this. This is smaller than the 5e combat tracker. So, you kind of have to, when you develop, you have to develop for every kind of resolution type, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have to develop. I usually try to develop around, I think it's 1080.
Yeah.
I can't remember the proper resolution. But I always kind of develop around that kind of small laptop resolution.
Okay, that makes sense.
I try to keep there because people with big screens, right?
Yeah.
Can have more windows on them, can stretch them out. And again, I also have to develop for those people too. So if I stretch this out, I need to make sure, see how the controls don't go all the way to the right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm gonna have to restructure this to make it sure it works all the way to the right.
Yeah.
So, like the census line does, right?
Right.
So when I'm developing, I'm constantly making changes. I'm looking at I develop for the small resolution, which is usually my base.
Yeah.
And then I usually then develop for like stretching it out and seeing what it looks like.
Right.
Joseph's very famous for forcing me to kind of give that look because he
that's important.
Stuff.
Yeah, that's important.
He likes he has a big screen. So
yeah.
He constantly will stretch this out, Gumby style.
Right.
And then I'm sitting there going like, well,
most people don't do that. You're like,
I'll have to make some changes, right? Like this does not look sexy having this open space right here, right? And I try to limit this as much as possible, but some cases it's a lot of work to get these to kind of line up and also stay within certain stretches, right? Like making it stretch out evenly. And that's where a lot of the character sheet design philosophy comes in, where I make constantly changes on the fly to make sure this also looks good, no matter how you're stretching it out and how you're like, I don't know. I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong. Right?
Yeah, I know.
If you like it small, great. Then I'll build it to make it look great while it's small. If you like it wide, where it takes up your whole screen like this, well, then I have to develop to make sure it works that way.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes. So what would be helpful to me if I was going to design a character sheet in this case, it'd be nice to have a published list of bounds for the main core rule sets so that I have a starting point and not just digging into the code trying to figure all that out. It would be nice to know that ahead of time. So when I'm developing for it, I go, okay, I'm not going outside of these starting bounds, and then I'll work from there instead of...
let's go with that process, right? So
Mhm.
first off, the character sheet. These are the bounds that it starts out with.
Mhm.
RPG size is 525 pixels
Okay.
wide, 568 height. Right. That's
Yeah. That's your min
RPG level.
max. Yeah.
That's the size. That's where it places it when it first loads up. Size limits are saying, hey, I don't want to go any smaller than this. As big as it wants, but this is the size I want it to go to. Right
Yeah.
now, mind you, as a developer, if I'm being an extension developer, I want to make such changes. I can make it whatever I want, right? And I'm not going to stop you. Me as a SmiteWorks developer is not going to stop you. If you want it super super small, I can go in here and make those changes. I can make it 125 by 125 or
Right.
125 by 568. And you have
Right.
this super thin sliver, right? Now, if I suddenly say I can give you recommendations, well, the recommendation is 525, 568. Why?
Right.
Because CoreRPG is literally the smallest character sheet that we currently have.
Aha. Yep. Gotcha.
See, it comes full circle of why I recommend studying core RPG and then
Mhm.
building off of it and using what's there. Now I can come in here if I need to make on a character sheet that looks like that, right? In terms of shape, right? And then I want to build all my structures inside of it. Then I'm going to have to actually make some changes, right? And the fastest way is using the debug window. Remember how I was telling you how you can see the width and the height
Yep.
of the window?
Yep.
So right now, the width and the height of the window is 525, 568. That matches these numbers. So if I do this, I put it to here. Guess what? Now I know what the width and height should be. 943, 958.
Right.
Make it bigger. So I have my numbers here. All I got to do, all I got to do is now go in here, do a join on char sheet, and then just change the placement and the size limits.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
So again, it comes down to, but then you also got to realize that AC Grounds is a community game, right? It's a community system that if I make a rule set or an extension that forces this on to people, and they're stuck with this.
Yep.
There's no way to go back.
Right.
So, but that's where placement comes in. I can place it at that width. Then I can also then set limits of, then I can shrink it down if I think it's too big. But then you have to develop for those two kind of aspects in
Right.
terms of resolution.
Yep.
So there's a lot of consideration that one of my main focuses in my development process is I have to code for everybody.
Yep.
It may make some people angry, but I try to limit that as much as possible. I try to put in as much as I can with reasonable results, right?
Yep.
And if I'm making an extension and if I'm not like say I go from building an extension just for me, I don't care about anybody except for people who join my table, right?
Right.
But if I'm putting it on the forge or I'm trying to sell a rule set in our store, you need to now focus on making everybody somewhat happy with what you come up with.
And that's where your tech debt comes in, right?
You could, yeah. If you add too many features, you could be more or less painting yourself in the corner with a lot of features that you have to maintain, especially new features that are not core RPG based ones. Like core RPG based ones would be like the dice skin stuff, right?
Mhm.
If I'm okay with SmiteWorks handling all of the dice skin related stuff, why am I going to change it? Right.
Right.
I'm not going to go in there and make changes because then I'll have to make sure that if dice skins get changed, I'm going to have to kind of stay up with them. Things along those lines.
Yeah. So that's another good lesson is like, don't paint yourself in a corner with too much stuff because then you're going to be spending more time doing that than actually having fun or playing Fantasy Grounds, right?
Exactly. But you also realize that I'm just showing you another tool for your tool belt as a GM.
Yep.
Right? If the players are consistently your session's getting bogged down because you want basically like say you're in your homebrew, you're adding honor and sanity to your system in 5e. Well, you find a place where to put it on the character sheet. Now, guess what? Your players have honor and sanity. It has no real functionality. It's just a place to store that data. But then you can start. That's where you start. Start small, and then you want to add automation to that. You then keep adding it step by step. Eventually, while you're doing your campaign, you could eventually create a whole new feature without even realizing it at that point. So again, start small. Don't reinvent the wheel. Like if something in CoreRPG already does what you need it to do, don't change it. Just use that control, and then you can then slightly make changes to that control by just overriding it, as you can see here. Like for instance, if I want to add a neat little function, so let's say script, and I do function on click down. I can't remember what click down does. Let's see. I mean, what variables I need. Just a bad example. Okay, it's just empty. Now, mind you, normally string label has its own functions too. So you're also going to have to look at the control here and make sure you're not overriding a base functionality of the control, right? But I know there's no click down particularly for this, so I can do return true. And then function on click release, or down, I think it's click release is, yeah, let's do that. Okay, and then I do set value, I am the best, right? And now I can then reload it. Now that's on the race control, right? So if I go to this and I click here and I click that, see, didn't work. So I need to return true. You see bugs in real time with this AMA here, guys. Let's see. See if this works. Yep, there you go. See, all I did is click on it. Now it says I am the best.
Yep.
And guess what? Now, here's a fun little fact. I just override how the click works. So normally if I click into one of these string labeled controls, I have somewhere I can type, right?
Yep.
But guess what? This won't let me do that now because I've overridden it, told it, hey, when I want you to click on this label, I want you to just put that string in. That's all I want you to do. I don't care what else we need to do, right? But I could also do false. I think this might work. We'll see. I don't know if this is going to work. We'll see. Now, I think I can do this. Set focus. We're working in real time now. Let's see.
So while he's
trying to see, I know this might not work, but yeah, there you go. See, now I can click in here,
right,
and do things and make as much as I want. But as you can see, it still puts the base I am the best in here. So I can do this. I am the best
of the worst.
I can do this. So if I something to pre-populate, again, this is just me kind of coding on the fly here. But if I do that, I can go now use the arrow keys. I don't know.
I'm the best of the worst.
I don't know. I am big best. I don't know. But my point is now here's the problem though. Now if I click in this here again, it's going to replace that.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's where coding comes in. You're going to have to kind of start small. Remember, I wanted to have some way of setting the data I want, right? And then again, this could also be me reinventing the wheel, right? I can sit here and go, instead of using the scripts, right? I can do this. Use default. Those I am a little right. I think that's going to work. Let's have a look. Now that only works if it's empty. right? So I can click in here now, delete it, right? Now it's not going to load, right? It doesn't do anything. So if I delete this and go here, I am a little, and see now it's already pre-populated with that, and I can go in here and make
Right.
a change.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So you kind of have to kind of tinker a little bit to see how it functions and whether or not it's going to function properly for you. Now, this down here, this is a change with the XML, right? This down here is a change with the script, and so you're gonna have to balance whether or not I make a change directly with the XML, or do I make a script to kind of do what I need it to do.
Gotcha.
So
So most of these projects start
and
off.
then I can also tell it to go look at a script file as well instead.
Right.
If I have a lot of different functions I want to make this particular control do.
Right. So most of these things, they kind of stem from the desire for the GM to make his table run a little faster or more efficient.
Yeah.
But then they decide, oh, maybe this is cool enough where more people want to use it, and then pretty soon they inherit this tech debt, and then you're on your way to managing the extensions. But GM Daddy Cat wanted to know, I guess from your opinion too, is like, what's the best way to become a community developer? So he wanted to know what's the best way to do that.
I think we covered it. You start
Yeah.
building extensions for yourself.
Yeah.
For your table, and if it's success at your table, then
Right.
maybe release one on
Yeah.
the forge or in the forums. People play around with it. Start small. Everything you always want to start small, and it's my actually one recommendation for actually running campaigns too.
Oh
Is
yeah.
you start small, and that means you don't get overwhelmed. That if you have like an extension that's doing very well
Mm-hmm.
and has very little bugs and reports that this isn't working properly, then release a second one.
Right.
Now you have two you have to maintain. Remember,
Right.
the more you release to the public, I say if you really want to be a great extension developer for the community, and release a lot of extensions that will actually fulfill a need.
Yep.
Right. That's the extensions that people go after. Something that is missing from our code base that the community absolutely wants. Now, mind you, a lot of that stuff is high end or to expert level, not intermediate to expert level. Novices might kind of get, but you never know. You might have an extension from a novice that basically has a great idea, and a more seasoned extension developer might offer to come help expand it, or then you have a collaboration. It's all about community at that point.
Yeah.
If you don't want to engage with the community and you want to just stay with your own group and table, that's okay too.
Yep.
But realize that you could actually become much stronger by putting it out there and seeing how it kind of does.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I code a rule set, I'm in a vacuum. I code it for me at that point, right?
Right.
I have a lot of ideas that I'm trying to make sure, and again, I've made so many rule sets now that I've kind of have an idea of what people are looking for in terms of general design. But I'm not sure if this particular design idea that I have is going to work. That's why Joseph helps me out with testing these rule sets out
Yep.
with his test group, and they run sessions. They play the game. That's the
Yeah.
only way you're really going to find out whether or not your extension holds up is through gameplay. Does it actually become a hindrance?
Right.
Like, does it bug out a lot? Well, then that's not a very good extension. And then you need to figure out what the structure is. But
Mm-hmm.
the more you do, the more projects you do, the more experience you get, the more stuff you add to your toolbox. Right now, I could probably code up, if you gave me a PDF of a very simple rule set like Powered by the Apocalypse, or let's not go that far. I mean, that's way open. But like a very simple, maybe OSR clone, right? And if I wanted to build it really quickly to where I'm at, like I call it core level functionality, where there's not a lot of bells and whistles, there's not a lot of facts, there's not a lot of very in-depth connections between the dice rolls, and I just want something as simple as like a character sheet, an NPC sheet, some simple combat tracker functionality where you track your wounds and your AC and all that kind of good stuff, but there's no real marriages between the attack roll and your armor value. I can build that in a very short amount of time because I have experience of building very quick things, right? Now, I can build it very quickly, but then I'm going back, especially for a commercial release, I'm expanding it from that base, right? And then I'm also expanding and making sure workflows are correct and how they function. Because if, like for instance, if I'm doing a lot of like say I wanted to make a roll and I'm on the main tab and I now have to hop to abilities to click a whole bunch of buttons to add all my modifiers. Then I have to go to my inventory, click on the weapon that I want to do, and then go to the actions tab to then click on a roll, and it adds all that stuff together. That's very tedious, uh, process. Well, why not create a whole control that does all of that inside the action tab? That just goes and collects all that information, right? I have controls in the entry that tells it what stat to use, what skill to use, what inventory item to use, that kind of thing. So when you go through that, start small, start like almost like a shotgun approach where you just put everything on the page, you put it into Fantasy Grounds, and then start playing with it. You'll get feedback. Your players will tell you, "Hey, man, this is just becoming like I'm not having any fun because I'm clicking on like 5 different things." Then you take that feedback, go back to your laboratory, and you start tinkering more and get it to a more finer point.
Yeah, so you got to
Um,
balance between your feng shui there, the visible component, and then also the
mhm,
functionality, right?
right.
So you got 3 different things to consider when you're developing that stuff.
I recommend theory books for web design.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of that feng shui
Yep.
approach.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you a lot of great philosophies, great design ideas on how to drill down and give data to the user um, at like a core level. Like you're not going to reuse a lot of the. I wouldn't say you. I mean, you may, but you're looking for the theory. You're looking at how do we display information, and how do we drill down to give it to the player in a meaningful way without drawing out. Like for instance, if I'm in the middle of combat, I don't want to go have to click 5 different windows to go find my spells,
Right.
all right, and things like that. So you're gonna have to kind of play around with it and find that design that you're happy with. And again, your design philosophy might not be everybody's cup of tea, so be prepared for some criticisms.
Right.
And because I get yelled at quite a bit actually.
What can
um,
you comment on the rule set wizard in a positive way? Like,
yeah,
what
of
was your
course.
take on
I
that?
think the ruleset was great. Actually, it's a great initial tool if you want my honest opinion. But I it does things differently that what I've just illustrated here, like the file structure, it doesn't enforce it. You'll have to enforce it yourself. And as a new person trying to tinker with Fantasy Grounds, you might get tripped up on that initial part. Because collaboration means like if you do rule set wizard, you might have to collaborate with a lot of other rule set wizard users, right? Um, if I tell you, hey, you come back at me, I'm getting this error message, and you're using their built-in dice roller, I personally don't know how that's built, right? I know how Fantasy Grounds does it and CoreRPG does it. So I'll give you that recommendation. So it kind of can get lost in translation there, but I still feel it's a great tool to get you a jump start on building these windows without having to sit here and like we pointed out with the bounds. I'll be sitting here going like, okay, I need to go up 30 pixels, 5 pixels, and then I then go and reload, and then I don't like that, and I go back to 525. You're constantly doing those kind of tweaks
Yeah.
on the XML to get everything anchored and looking right in this line, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you look over here for the detail stuff, you can see how this anchoring can get a little complicated if you're just not aware of what everything does in here, right? Like right now, I told it, hey, we're gonna add this to the detail frame. We're gonna put it in the inside of the frame, in the top left. I'm gonna move 15 pixels off from the left, 10 pixels from the top. And then I'm going to tell it, hey, I want a width of 150 pixels and a height of 20, right? And then from there, I'm just anchoring everything off of that control and positioning it to the right. That's all this is saying, right? Now, if I wanted to do this in XML, I have to think about it in my head, or I constantly have to keep reloading and seeing what it does,
Yeah.
right? So again, it comes down to, I recommend actually learning both. If you're going to use Ruleset Wizard, learn both ways. Like, get your feet wet with Ruleset Wizard, play around in it a little bit, but ultimately learn it this way, because this way can be a little bit faster if you can think abstractly about where things are going to be. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I can tell, like, that's 5 pixels off from the edge. That's 5 pixels off of that edge. There's buffers around everything, and you can kind of see just by looking at it how many pixels you might be off, and you want things lined up correctly. You know, you can kind of tell that by just looking at it and saying, "Oh, well, if you've looked at enough controls and where they line up, you'll build that tool, that muscle memory of like, oh, I just need to move it 5 pixels."
Right.
Or if I move it 5 pixels, or I can move it 15 and try to find a middle ground between the two. Like, I go a little bit over what I think it should be, and then I just scooch it back a little bit, that kind of thing. So those are kind of skills you pick up by actually working directly with the XML, because that's what Wizard does. Is it's there to basically give you a visual way to build up a lot of your stuff
Mm-hmm.
in a visual IDE, basically.
Yeah.
Now we have no part in that particular program. That's developed by a third party, and they're the one maintaining it. They're the ones that are putting out updates for it, things along those lines. I'm saying it's a tool, just like everything else that we offer you. It's a tool for your toolbox. If you feel you need that extra step of having a visual representation, go for it. If it helps you learn to get further along in your journey, go for it.
Right.
But if you learn better by looking at this code and breaking it down, understanding it at base level, that every other developer that works internally within the company goes through, because I don't use Ruleset Wizard.
Yeah.
John, Moon Wizard doesn't use Ruleset Wizard. I don't think anybody does.
Well, that's
All right,
because you
so
guys have developed a muscle memory where you don't really need it.
exactly, and that's where that toolbox comes in, right? Like,
Yeah.
I can, as you saw, I built an extension literally in 2 seconds just by grabbing the files I need, trimming it down, and then spending not a lot of time kind of working through it, right? Um, and also, I have close to 5 years of experience. Actually, I'd say closer to 8 years of
Yeah.
experience, because I developed about 3 years before I got hired
Right.
on. Um, I got hired on because I released, I think it was a total of 4 rule sets to the community. Now, I got started actually expanding the more core system, not
Yeah.
CoreRPG, but more core.
Right.
I was trying to help Damien out with adding more specialized more core rule sets that were built on top of it. So that's
Right.
where I got my start, and I built, I think, Shadowrun 5th edition, Ars Magica. I can't think of the other ones, honestly, off the top of my head. It's Cyberpunk 2020,
Yep.
things like that. So
Sweet.
I did an eclectic bunch of projects that helped me get my foot through the door and understand how to develop professionally for the company, right?
Gotcha.
And now, mind you, I'm not saying release everything for free, but I released everything for free. I did not look for compensation for it. Um, understand that if maybe when you're first starting out, maybe release some things free, see what people say about it. If they like it and you start getting a nice little following going, maybe the next one comes out with a price tag to it.
Right.
But don't expect to get paid, $30 for an extension if it's your
Yeah.
first one and nobody knows who you are.
Yeah.
So,
Any other questions? Because we're at the 2 hour marks or past that.
yeah,
So
yeah. And I don't want to get Layron in trouble for going over his time. Like I said, this whole subject matter is like,
endless.
as you saw, it's huge. It's huge, and I could sit here and mentor you all day long. But I'm learning new things every day too.
Right.
It's a really fun, for me. It's another side of RPGs. Like, there are those GMs out there that love painting minis and making terrain and building their tables up and all that kind of stuff. Well, in the digital world, we're those GMs, right?
Right.
That like to tinker with the code a little bit. And again, you can learn just enough to be a danger to your to your table with this system, and then that's okay. Like, as you can see, building an extension is not a very drawn out process. It's actually very simple. Just grab the things you want to change, put them in an extension file, and make those changes. Right? As long as it matches up with a window class or a control name that is within a layered system that you're on top of.
Right.
Rule sets are the same way. Believe it or not, I use this same process for rule sets. The only thing different is that I'm making it on a much globaler scale and more global scale, excuse me. And then on top of it, I'm also making files for the system, right?
Yeah.
Within the rule set folder itself. So like this stuff would not be sitting on in my main rule set, right?
Yeah.
This won't sit here. This won't do nothing. I need to basically include file sources and things like that, where it will pull that information and then make that rule set happen from there.
All
But
right.
yeah.
Okay. Also, we'd like
So
feedback.
any more questions?
Yeah. I mean, even if you don't have a question, if you have a comment about content, like if you
Yeah.
guys like this, or if there's something we should cover next time, like we can plan something. Because right now, Super Teddy has kind of a lull. I wouldn't say a complete lull, but he has a kind of a little breathing room right now. But eventually, he'll have to get back into this development cycle. But
Yeah, I'll be back to the grind.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Getting
if you
back to
guys
grind
want
here
something, next time he gets a break, we'll do another show like this, but maybe we can do something more pointed. Battles Tech rule set win.
Well, I'm giving you the tools to start making one. Go ahead.
There you go.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
I love BattleTech. I like big stompy robots. My favorite's a cataphract. So, yeah.
Bane said it's
Like I
been
said-
4 days since he's asked you that, so he had to ask again.
Yeah, that's okay. At least it's not a muffin button question.
Or
pizza button.
pizza,
Sorry,
pizza. Yeah,
button.
same
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah. But yeah, guys, like I gave you a lot of information in the 2 hours that we've been sitting here, and unfortunately, as you can see, I could go off on huge tangents because mentioning one subject matter leads into another subject matter. It's
Mhm.
just, I gave you the tools to get started, how to crack open these rule sets and literally start to tinker, right? And then making those making these extensions. Extensions is the best way to start the whole process, because then I can literally just throw whatever I want in here. And again, in the extension, I can call it whatever I want. I can call it like, I called it FGA test here, but I can go in here and literally just grab window classes and just make changes.
Yep.
Swap changes and try, and then at some point I can probably piece it all together.
Yep.
Okay, what were your question?
Jacob?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I appreciate all the time and effort that you went through all this detail to explain kind of the process and kind of the methods of digging through it. I did want to ask, and this is my own personal interest. What is the status on the basically defunct 4th edition set? Is it still kind of being upkept, or is it just kind of fallen to the wayside, or?
It's in maintenance mode unless there's a developer attached to it. And maintenance mode doesn't mean it's defunct. We still provide bug updates and fixes to it. You just have to report it to the bug report thread that's in the forums. But maintenance mode doesn't mean we're going to expand the rule set. We don't have the resources to basically put time and energy. Like, for instance, the revamp for Vampire and Werewolf took me all summer. I had to build, well, more or less 3 rule sets. I did 10 modules, right? So I did 3 months of work. In 3 months, I did the amount of work that would probably be about 6 months of work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I dedicated, now mind you, Moon Wizard and Doug are the ones that dictate my dev hours. So they're saying, okay, I want you to work on this, and that's where like they're paying me to work on that. So
Right.
my time is kind of split between whatever they tell me is what they want me to work on. Right?
Right.
I could sit here and say, you know what, he's just loaded full of air, right? I'll start working on 4E, put some more features into it, but then you got to realize that they have to recoup those costs. 4E doesn't make us any money, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Not to be, I hate to say do nickels and dimes here, but 4E doesn't make any money. We don't sell modules for 4E.
Yeah.
Sell them for, I think 13 Days is still sold, if I remember correctly. But that does actually make us money.
Yep.
So, and 13 Days is built on top of 4E. So, you want 4E to get expanded, you might want to start putting money into 13th Age. But that's why we also did this Kickstarter thing, as Doug relayed in a forum post recently, is we're trying this whole Kickstarter idea to try to make sure that our investment in building or expanding a rule set is warranted by community's participation in it, right?
Yep.
So, like for instance, like you mentioned, Dune didn't really make us a whole lot of money,
Yep.
unfortunately, and I love that rule set actually, because I built that and I thought it was one of my like it has a great theme, it has a great design, it plays really well. It's just not somebody's cup of tea. So we actually um, didn't really make a lot of money off of that, and then that kind of gives us an idea that, oh well, if it didn't make a lot of money, then maybe this is not a subject or setting that our community really wants, right?
Right.
And then we don't dedicate dev hours to that particular thing. But anything that's in their current store right now, we try to maintain
Right.
unless there's a developer attached to it, and
Right.
it's just no expansion from there. It's all maintenance at that point. That doesn't mean it's dead, but it just means that we're not expanding it with new features.
It's a low priority.
It makes sense.
Understandable. It's been an issue with the rule set itself in any format because there's so many shackles attached to it because of the license that's involved.
That's
with
it.
Yeah.
But no, and my pointed question was whether it's still being upkept, at least trying to keep up with the changes and everything else, or
Of course.
things. Okay.
Yeah,
That's what I was curious about.
Yeah.
Yep. Core level,
Moon Wizard
probably.
Moon Wizard just spent, I think, a couple weeks building out standardization for all the window frames and stuff, and 4E was part of that process. So anything internally, and the internal rule sets are the ones that are basically like 5E, 3.5, Pathfinder 1, Pathfinder 2E, but that's done by Trenlo. 2E or Classic D&D, that's done by Celestian. I'm trying to think of the other ones, but all in mine, the Modifius 2D20s, Vampires now on that list, Werewolves now on that list. Let's see. We also got One, I think it's called WOIN. That's on the list. There's also basic role playing, Mutants Masterminds. Mind you, anything that doesn't have a developer attached to it, me and Moon Wizard are the ones looking at bug reports and killing them. So, expanding a rule, trying to keep up with all those bug reports, it doesn't leave a lot of time for expanding or other development ideas. I also do R&D too on the rule set side. So, like like I said, I built the reference manual builder, at least the prototype, and I helped Moon Wizard get it into the system. He refined the code. He made it much better than I came up with. We gotta go back and forth on that kind of process. And then I built the Starfinders in that list as well. As you can see, if a new book comes out for Starfinder and there's some new mechanism Paizo comes out with for Starfinder, I kind of try to code it as best I can into the system without devoting a lot of time to it. Like I added mech support and I added a ship combat tracker to it, things along those lines. So just because it's in maintenance mode, just because it's in maintenance mode doesn't mean that it's abandoned. Definitely keep bringing in bug reports, and we'll keep trying to squash them as best we can.
Any other questions or suggestions for future content? You guys can either put it in Classroom 1, or if you're online, just put a blurb out there for something more focused. Maybe we'll focus on core, or we'll focus on one of the specific rule sets that Teddy works on, Super Teddy, Dom, something
Yep.
like that.
I mean,
Will you and
unfortunately, go ahead.
Will you and Trendo do Starfinder 2?
Will I do something with Trendlow?
Yes.
Probably. I mean, depends on how Starfinder 2 comes out.
I mean,
'Cause
from what they are teasing, it might just be like one
If
big
it's a copy
Paizo
and
2
paste,
rule set.
yeah, if it's copy and paste to Pathfinder 2e, I might have to fork his code. So we'll be working kind of similar together. Again, I don't even know if I'm working on it. So
Yeah.
that's 2 years down the line. But my ultimate goal would be at some point kind of collabing with him, because he's been a rock star since I got started with the community. So I think he's a great guy. He's a great developer. He is very patient in a lot of cases with newcomers. He tries to educate them on. I mean, I remember when I first started, he had tons of forum posts on how to create an action, how to make a dice roll, and other things like that. So him, Damien or Damned, is another big big titan in our community that loves to help out newcomers, especially on the coding side of things. He may say he's not a coder, but you know what? He's made more core, X core. He's made a. I think he has the record for the most rule sets built by a developer. Um, you know, they have varying levels of functionality in terms of automation, but hey, it lets you play the system, and that's what's important, right? It gives you a better framework than CoreRPG has. Now, I'm not saying you can't play with CoreRPG, but there are some people out there that just don't feel like having to do the lot of work building up a core sheet and within the core system that has not a whole lot of bells and whistles that like 5e might have. But he does try to make that happen. Starfinder 2e, I did see the announcement, but there's been no walking orders on my end of what I'm supposed to be doing. So until Paizo lets us know what we're doing, I'll most likely either I will do it, or if Trenlo wants to do it, then he can jump in. It's just we haven't decided anything. I don't have any clue where that direction's going to go, but it would be nice. Sure.
All right.
All right. Anybody else before we go? Because we're way over. So
Yeah, and I have a meeting here soon. So
I just want to say, as a developer, if you're going to develop stuff, try to call the underlying code always, and try not to
Yes.
blow things away and remove things, because that's where you're going to have a lot of conflicts and a lot of upkeep. And if you always call the underlying code, you're probably not going to have a lot of upkeep, and things are going to work.
yeah,
True.
it's easier to track down bugs and stuff.
Yeah, well,
And
you're not
that's
going to
why-
conflict with other people too, right? So
Yeah,
Well, that's why I laid out both methods, right? Me in rule set development, I don't have to really care about other people's, code, right? That's my focus. I deal with kind of the lowest layer, and then I also talk with the guy that maintains the lowest layer for me, right? So I can be like, hey, I need this changed, and he can go and change it, right? But I wanted to show both processes that will get you to the end result, right? Again, deleting is sometimes not always a good idea, but if I'm making a rule set and I'm working with CoreRPG to try to cut down on my code, and I don't want this here, right? And it's kind of been a staple for CoreRPG for quite some time. It saves me a whole bunch of dev hours just by simply doing a join and delete. You're right, but you're not wrong. Again, those pros and cons that I laid out is that you have to make sure what you're signing up for based on what decision. You want to keep this in stone the way you want it, then copy and paste, right? Replace the whole window class itself and not use the merge join. But if you want to inherit the features from from a script that you think will be globally available all the time, but understanding that you may have to keep maintaining it and there's some debt there. Yes, merge join does have a lot more cons in that direction. But again, in the future, your code might be a couple lines long just by simply either joining or just replacing certain things, or even copying window classes like a template in the future. I think we're touching base with that now with the copy tag, where I can actually just simply do, if I wanted to change this window class into um, char sheet main, I can then copy it, right, and then it will then inherit all of everything that char sheet main has to offer. Now, mind you, there's a lot more rules related to copy, which hasn't been laid out quite yet because it's still a brand new flag for our system. But it is a very powerful tool that can definitely get you even further along. And we're slowly getting there where we're standardizing the core base, and it's just very highly recommended to work off of core as a base, especially if you want to inherit a lot of things. Because I can tell you right now, I've used both processes, right? Like if I'm going to make an NPC sheet, I tend not to merge with the original NPC sheet in core. I just replace it, right? The reason why is because I don't want to inherit anything from there. I don't want to have that tech debt of making sure I'm removing things and all that kind of stuff. So I just simply just replace the whole window class. So yeah, I'm agreeing with you. It's just you find the best tool for the job. You don't use a Phillips head screwdriver when you need a hammer. The best analogy I can come up with.
Right, but some of the spaces are so crowded right now that if you just replace things, you end up with conflicts. Like most of the extension conflicts when they're between two extensions is because somebody didn't call the underlying code and just blew things away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like there are processes related to scripts that will help you with that. Like for instance, using super, or making sure that you make a whole new function that basically starts with the original function instead, so you're layering on top of the script. A lot of extension developers don't do that. They don't do the extra steps to make sure their code doesn't run into conflict with other things. Again, you start with
Right, and then they
coding.
have super too, right? You want to
Mhm.
call super even if it doesn't exist, just in case somebody else is in that space.
Correct. That's why if I was going to do an extension, I always started out with if super dot like on init, right? Then then you call super on init, right? And like that simple one line could save you hours of headaches when you're starting to work with other extension developers, you know, or whatever the function that you're basically attached to, right? You can see a lot of examples of that with the combat tracker, believe it or not, because we're slowly making changes, not to global scripts, mind you, but mostly like the combat tracker. Then in the combat tracker, we're doing a lot of self and super, to where if you want to overwrite how the health tracker gets called, you can simply just do uh, basically a replacement script on it and just call super on init, or super on health tracker change, whatever the function name is, and then it'll run through its base functionality, and then you're just basically adding code to the tail end at that point, right? That's kind of how I think a lot of extension developers don't prepare for that, right? And that's where that experience comes in when you release it, and then suddenly, Matt Curie is trying to track down why his extension is erroring with yours, or a Silent Ruin mentions in a forum post that, oh, you need to talk to this person because it might be a problem with their code, and you see, then you open up, ask him to have a look at his code and see, well, where am I screwing up? What's the problem here? And then most likely it tends to be because they're not those scripts aren't later on top. So it's a lot of things for the toolbox. And again, I don't deal with a lot of that because I'm not in the game, as it were, anymore in terms of extension development. I don't have to worry about it,
Yeah.
me as a developer.
Right,
But
but I'm just saying if you do replace, know what you're signing up for because you're going to
oh
have
yes,
way more problems than if you can do it and call the underlying code. Your life's going to be so much easier
oh
if you can
yeah, and
manage that. Sometimes
Yeah,
it's not possible, but
and I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I completely agree with you. I wanted to illustrate both methods because again, when you're making a rule set, I don't care what you're doing, right? Because I'm building at the lowest level. That's why merge and join are great for rule set code, right? Because I'm merging and replacing what CoreRPG has to offer. Again, I can do both methods. But as an extension developer, you might want to replace it, or maybe just merge. Like, say for instance, I want to change what the functionality, like you saw here, where I changed the code for the race label, right? And if there's already code attached to it, right? Which if I looked up string labeled, I'm sure there's some scripts attached to it. I can then simply just basically merge join on this particular control and just replace that script to do what I want. Again, back to what you're saying, the shortcomings of replacing something could potentially be a huge problem. But in order for me to do the script function on init, and then I do if super on init, then I'm an idiot. There we go. Then super on init, and then that means I call whatever's below me, right, in terms of load order. And then if the extension who has a load order lower than me basically has an on init change, it will run that and then continue on until it follows down the path. And then I can just do whatever code I want here. Now, mind you, not everybody's going to follow that process, right? And unfortunately, we can't police extension developers to do that thing, right? But that is good. That's a good shout out to make sure that you can understand why these two extensions don't work together, right?
Yep.
And it helps you understand when you run into downloading stuff from the Forge and you're like, oh, I'm getting errors all. I don't know why. What's wrong? And then you have to hunt down why you're having that conflict and things like that. But definitely agree. Watch what you do. Like every method I've described always has a con attached to it. You just got to be willing to own up to that con and realize, or possibly even and make that decision of like, well, maybe I just need to replace the whole thing and start from what I want to see, right? If I just copy and paste chart sheet right now and make the changes I want, guess what? I shouldn't have any more conflicts except for another extension for somebody else because the extension's expecting the normal chart sheet that it's extending, right? But I'm replacing the whole thing now. See what I'm saying? So you're not wrong. They're both methods are definitely riddled with their own landmines. You just got to make sure where to go from there, and then each situation will change that response, as it were. Hopefully that helped, illustrate that a little bit more. All right. By myself.
All right.
No, you're
I'm
not by
still
yourself.
here.
Okay. I can't see the chat. I apologize.
It's okay. Bane had a couple comments. Bane had a couple comments and questions. So one, even though he's not heavy into vampire, he likes the approach and the design and that sort of thing. He really appreciates that. But his question, now I don't know if you can answer this or not, because I don't think you work on the rule set, but they're talking about, he's asking about the 5e rule set. One, is the concept or the approach going to be to leave it the way it is and build on top of it, or are they going to potentially create an extension? That's what I thought. Okay.
I can't comment on that. We don't have a decision yet, and the information related to that conversation is not for public consumption at the moment.
Okay, that's what I thought.
We're still waiting on what WotC. Like, the funny thing is WotC just a whole summer full of Unearthed Arcana that had huge changes to the rule set, right? And if we would have tried to keep up with that, it just got recently announced that they're literally just ripping everything. Like, they're not even using a good, I'd say, 80 to 90% of what they were talking about over summer. So it looks like 5e is kind of the same. But there might be some slight changes. So again, and because they called it 5e, it might not be a whole new rule set. It might have to incorporate things. So I can't give you definitive what we're going to do. And unfortunately, the information I can tell you is that we'll find a solution for it. That's
Yeah. Yeah, they
Sorry.
backpedaled a lot, so there's no way to know.
Yeah. So we got to wait till they make a final decision on it, and we have access to those files and seeing what the actual rule set looks at the back end. That's kind of one of the biggest pet peeves of mine when it comes to rule set development is I need information. I need to know like how things operate. Now, all of our publishers that we work with are excellent at providing me that information. Like if I have a question about a rule, I can reach out to them and ask away. Now, mind you, the community dev doesn't exactly have that have that available to them. But you know, information's key. Like I always get tripped up on some micro system that has a very variant rule that is, you know, on a Thursday with a full moon, and we roll this many dice, but we also subtract a die because that person's, you know, wearing red boots instead of blue boots today, you know, and that's where you kind of have to really
draw the line.
Try to figure out how to automate that process. And sometimes you just default to not even touching it with a 50-foot pole, you know. So, you know, rule set development, especially when it comes to 5e, I don't personally work on 5e. Now I collaborate on it with Moon Wizard to help with any new feature that might be possible. My particular feature of 5e is the character wizard. I built that. Well, I didn't build it particularly from the start. That was Hollis before, but I came in and made it what it is today. And you know, there's some shortcomings still with it. It has a great base, but it still has some. It doesn't do everything that I wanted to do. So at some point, I might expand it at some point. It just hasn't floated to the top of my priority list, unfortunately. But as for the whole 5e rule set, no, I can't really comment too far into that discussion. Sorry, Bang.
Well, you're not even really working on that rule set anyways, right?
So, is there any more questions before we skedaddle?
I mean, if you gotta catch a meeting, you should go catch that meeting.
They wait for me. No, I just want to make sure everybody's got their fill. Of course, Leyrun is the master of ceremony, so I wanted to make sure I wasn't just bouncing out on him. Leyrun still here?
Leyrun, you're lighting up, but you're.
I'm here.
Anything.
Okay,
I'm here.
I just wanted to make sure. I didn't want to bounce out on you.
No, it's good. I was just here chewing away on my stream, and everyone here heard me eating. So I muted myself, and then now I forget to unmute myself. What a dummy. Anyway, so yeah, that's great. Guys, thanks for coming, Dom, and all the rest of you for showing interest. And like I said, leave some feedback in the Classroom 1 if you guys want anything in the future. And then, you know, you can yell at Teddy later, but I don't think he works on 5e, so it's kind of hard to comment on it anyway. So
it's not that. It's just the fact this is just everything's still up in the air.
I figured that.
We haven't finalized what our approach is going to be, because again, with them changing everything and then going backpedaling and all that kind of stuff. I'm not trying to blame WotC at all. It's just, I mean, it's their system. They can do
it's a playtest.
But when we have to try to convert that data, you know, it's much easier to get a final product and then work from there than try to keep up with the bouncing around.
I figured that. All right, guys. I think we'll call it. You guys have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you guys around next time. And I think I'm going to be working on some some other content that's related to Fantasy Grounds, but not programming. Thank God. So
Well, and again, hopefully you guys learned something and it makes you excited to try and tinker and see what you come up with.
exactly.
I just hope that's what this whole thing is for. It's just to get you excited, maybe bite the bullet and just start away and seeing what you can come up with. Again, if you're doing it for private and things break, no big deal, right? Just don't do it on a campaign that you're actively playing on. That's my big no. I've done that a few times and that did not end well. All right. Well, I gotta go. But thank you for having me, and we'll talk later on to see if this could happen again.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.